What if I told you that the version of World War II you learned in school is only half the story? Not because it's completely false, but because the real story is far more disturbing, more strategic, and more calculated than most textbooks dare to reveal. You were taught about heroic landings, evil dictators, atomic bombs, and clear-cut victories. But wars at that scale are never that simple. Behind every famous battle stood secret negotiations, intelligence deceptions, economic deals, and silent betrayals that reshaped the modern world in ways we still feel today. Take the outbreak of war. You've heard that it began when Adolf Hitler invaded Poland in 1939. But days before the invasion, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, two sworn ideological enemies, secretly signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty with a hidden clause. That hidden protocol divided Eastern Europe between them like slices of a cake. Poland was not simply invaded, it was pre-divided. This wasn't chaos, it was calculated geopolitics. And here's something rarely emphasized. While Britain and France declared war on Germany, there was a period called the Phony War. For months, little actual fighting happened on the Western Front. Europe was technically at war, yet strangely quiet. Behind that silence, intelligence agencies were already fighting a shadow war, intercepting codes, recruiting spies, manipulating information. One of the greatest secrets? The code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park. Under the leadership of mathematician Alan Turing, Allied cryptanalysts cracked the German Enigma code. But this victory carried a dark moral dilemma. Sometimes the Allies allowed attacks to happen. Yes, allowed them, because intervening would reveal that the code had been broken. Imagine knowing an attack is coming and choosing silence to protect a bigger strategic advantage. Now let's talk about economics. Before America officially entered the war, major US corporations maintained business ties with Germany. The narrative often paints the US as an immediate moral crusader after Pearl Harbor. But geopolitics is rarely moral at first. It's strategic. Oil, steel, and manufacturing. We're deeply entangled in global trade networks that didn't switch off overnight. And speaking of Pearl Harbor, new evidence over the decades has fueled debate over how much American leadership knew before the attack. Declassified documents suggest warnings existed, but whether they were specific enough remains controversial. Was it total surprise, or a calculated risk to mobilize public opinion? The deeper you dig into World War II, the less it looks like a simple battle between good and evil, and the more it resembles a global chessboard where millions of lives were the pieces. And we're only getting started, because the next secret involves a plan so deceptive, it fooled Hitler himself. In 1944, the Allies prepared for the most famous invasion in modern history, D-Day. But here's what they didn't emphasize in school. The invasion of Normandy almost didn't succeed because it wasn't just a military assault. It was one of the greatest deception campaigns ever executed. The operation was called Operation Bodyguard. Its mission: convince Germany that the invasion would happen somewhere else. And the centerpiece of that deception was a fake army. Yes, an entire fake army stationed in southeast England. Inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, fake radio transmissions, even fabricated military paperwork. This ghost force was commanded, at least on paper, by General Patton, someone the Germans deeply respected. When Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, German forces hesitated. Why? Because Hitler believed Normandy was a diversion. He expected the real attack at Pas-de-Calais. That hesitation changed history. Thousands still died, but without that deception, the casualties could have been catastrophic beyond imagination. But deception wasn't limited to Europe. In the Pacific, the US faced Imperial Japan in brutal island warfare. Yet one of the most pivotal victories, the Battle of Midway, was won not through firepower alone, but intelligence. American cryptanalysts broke parts of Japan's naval code and discovered Midway would be attacked. Instead of defending blindly, they prepared an ambush. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk in a single day. The balance of power in the Pacific shifted permanently. Now here's another hidden truth. The Soviet Union bore the brunt of Nazi Germany's military power. Roughly 80% of German military casualties occurred on the Eastern Front. Battles like Stalingrad weren't just battles, they were industrial-scale annihilation. Yet Western narratives often spotlight Normandy as the turning point. In reality, by the time D-Day occurred, Germany was already bleeding heavily in the East. And here's something rarely discussed: the uneasy alliance between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. Leaders like Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt cooperated with Joseph Stalin to defeat Hitler, but none of them trusted each other. Even before Berlin fell, discussions had begun about post-war influence and control. In other words, while World War II was still raging, the Cold War was already being born. And then came the Manhattan Project, a top-secret program so classified that even the Vice President of the United States didn't initially know it existed. Scientists raced to build a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever seen. When atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrendered. But historians still debate. Was Japan already close to surrender? Was the bombing meant not just for Japan, but as a warning to the Soviet Union? War ends, but power politics never do. And the final secret may be the most unsettling of all. When the war officially ended in 1945, the world celebrated victory. Cities lay in ruins, millions were dead, and dictatorships had fallen. But beneath the celebrations, governments were already making decisions that would shape the next half-century. One of the least discussed operations was Operation Paperclip. After Nazi Germany collapsed, the United States quietly recruited German scientists, including former Nazi Party members, to work in America. Rocket engineers, chemists, intelligence experts. Among them was Wernher von Braun, who later became instrumental in NASA's space program. The moral contradiction? These were individuals who had served a brutal regime, yet their expertise was too valuable to ignore. The Soviet Union conducted similar efforts, seizing technology and scientists for its own programs. The space race, the missile race, even aspects of the nuclear arms race. These were fueled in part by knowledge harvested from the defeated Third Reich. Then there's the redrawing of borders. At conferences like Yalta and Potsdam, Allied leaders determined the political future of Europe. Entire nations shifted west or east in influence. Millions were displaced. Germany itself was divided, setting the stage for the Berlin Wall and decades of tension. And consider this, many intelligence networks formed during WWII never disbanded. They evolved. Agencies like the CIA and KGB grew directly out of wartime espionage systems, the tools perfected in total war. Propaganda, psychological operations, covert intervention became standard instruments of Cold War policy. Even technology you use today has roots in World War II. Research, radar, jet engines, early computers, medical advancements. The war accelerated innovation at a terrifying speed. Humanity leapt forward technologically, while morally grappling with the consequences. So when you think of World War II, don't just picture battlefield heroics. Picture secret agreements signed in quiet rooms, code breakers making impossible choices, fake armies made of rubber, allies preparing for future rivalry before the war was even over, scientists crossing oceans under new flags, and leaders calculating not just victory, but dominance. History class gave you dates and names, but the real story? It's about secrets, decisions made in shadows, and a war that didn't truly end in 1945. It simply transformed. Because the echoes of those hidden choices still shape the world you're living in right now. And once you see that, you can never unsee it.